everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the Buzzworthy Women Podcast. Today, I am super excited to introduce you to our guest, April Roberts, founder of the Vixen Gathering. After navigating 3 careers and a successful 15-year business journey, April felt a calling to make a different impact. She discovered her purpose, guiding new female entrepreneurs through the thrilling entrepreneurial roller coaster. Rooted in deep connection to a greater purpose, April is on a mission to empower women. Let's jump into the conversation. Welcome, April. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Tori. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about what led you to creating the Vixen Gathering and living life on your terms.
Yeah, I think I've always been fairly good at living life on my terms, but we'll get into that as we go. So basically, I've lived enough life to understand that like our intuition, God, the universe, whatever it is you believe in, like when we're meant to make a change or do something different, it kind of like whispers to us, gently pushes us in the direction. And then we don't listen, we get what I call the 2x4 to the forehead, right? So I've had enough 2x4s to my forehead that, when I was getting the third whisper or calling to do something different, it was April of 2020. And you can imagine, let's think about what was going on April 2020, right? So I'm the CEO and owner of a financial planning company with a team. So every day I'm literally babysitting my team, babysitting my clients because the economy's in the toilet. And then I'm reading this book and I get the third sign. And I just literally remember looking up and going, really right now? But I knew the 2x4 was coming if I didn't listen. And so I did something I was not good at in the past, and that was ask for help because I didn't really, I kept having this vision of being in Madison Square Garden. I had seen Andrea Bocelli there for his Christmas concert. I had taken my mom, and it was just this magical event. And I just turned around. We were in the 5th row, and I was like, oh my gosh, could you imagine bringing joy to this many people, which is really what they're doing on the stage. I get goosebumps still when I think about it. So anyway, that vision came up in a couple of different moments. And the third one, I'm reading a book and the author is talking about his dream is to speak at Madison Square Garden. I was like, oh my gosh, this is the third time.
Wow.
Really right now?
Yes.
And it's April 2020. It's like there are no stages. No one's speaking. No one's going to Madison Square Garden. What the heck does this mean? Right. So I just reached out and, I was in a number of masterminds. I run masterminds now, but I personally have participated in them since 2012. And they've helped me keep my sanity and, find people that are lifelong friends. And so I just started reaching out and saying, hey, look, I'm feeling compelled to do, impact in a different way, to coach and speak and mentor. Can you help me? Do you know anyone? I don't even know what this is or how to do it. And I kept getting introduced to other women. And, remember at the time I was a financial advisor. I was a lawyer when I grew up, right? And so I've always been in male dominated industries. And so it was really cool that I was suddenly talking to all these women, mainly female entrepreneurs, kind of going through what I was going through. And, we were all trying to figure out what does life look like now. And one thing is I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years at that point. I just thought, well, if all these women are trying to figure out what's next, and I thrive on change and, I thrive on living life in my own terms, why don't I go try to be a guide? Or because you really just have to be 10% ahead of the curve to help people, right? It's not like you have to be a super expert, which is a misnomer. I loved when we were getting on, you were like, we're just going to be real. I was like, great. That's how I operate best. Right.
For sure. It's interesting what I call it the frying pan moment.
Oh, yes.
So when you said that, I was waiting for it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is she going to say frying pan moment? I'm like, oh my gosh, close enough. Pretty darn close.
That would have been hilarious.
I know. Because you're so right. There's so many taps on the shoulder that we all
Mhm.
have, not just, women, female entrepreneurs, but everyone. And it's a matter
Yeah.
of whether you listen to those cues or directions or insights that you get to take you down this path that has, basically been led for you and, put together for you to go down these certain paths. And so I
Yeah.
love that, you kind of followed that intuition direction, and it's led you to where you are. My experience is very similar. I came from a real estate and construction background, with
Mhm.
marketing, doing marketing, corporate marketing, that sort of thing, which is all male dominant. A lot of, specifically in construction. And it's just been, the last year and a half, I've also felt like women entrepreneurs, one myself, there's
Yeah.
so much that we don't know. And in building community is one of the greatest things that I think
Mhm.
us female entrepreneurs can do for each other, is to come
Yeah.
together, support one another, and grow together, because there's so much strength in the unity of female
Mhm.
entrepreneurs. And so I love, we're both on the same page, which is obviously why you're here on the Buzzworthy Women Podcast. So let's talk specifically about some of the challenges that female entrepreneurs have and how you help them with, finding their value,
Mhm.
knowing their worth, balancing their life. Talk about, what
Mhm.
you do to help those women entrepreneurs.
I love that. Thank you. And, you talked about living life on our own terms. I think, especially for women and especially when we find ourselves like middle-ish of life, we can have a whole nother podcast on this, but I'm convinced I'm living to 124. So, I'm only a third of the way through my life right now. I don't like to say I'm midway through my life because I have a lot of life to go. But I mean, the bottom line is, most of my clients that I coach, like, yes, they run companies or they've started companies, but they have kids at home. They have parents they're taking care of. Like, my parents have started having issues. And as women, we are the caretakers for our families and we just have all these other hats to wear. And so, in my experience, women think, oh, to make more money, I have to give something up because they have so
Mm,
much on their plates. When really
yeah.
you just have to optimize your time, your energy, your vision, what you focus on. And that's why I think the compelling vision is so important because it's running business on our terms. Because the second challenge I experienced personally was when I started my financial practice, and I had just gotten out of a divorce. Like my husband had addiction issues. There were a lot of things. So I was just like
Yeah.
leaving my old life behind, like running forward. Right. So when
Yeah.
someone taught me something, I was like, okay, I'll go do it. Okay, I'll go do it. Like, I mean, I really was starting from nothing because all of our money had been squandered in this divorce.
Mm,
And it's funny when you're operating from there with nothing to lose, you just do what people suggest to you or you just try. The problem is now in our lives, we have kids, we have parents, we have all these people dependent on us. So we almost don't have that freedom to run free like that, right? Which is why I think a lot of women have guilt and scarcity mentality, etc. But one thing I find is hard is a lot of business planning, coaching, how we're taught to run business. This happened to me too, is a very masculine energy modality. So
mm,
we talked about doing life on our own terms. I actually think being an entrepreneur is a phenomenal way for a woman to balance family life and business because you can create the business and the life that you want, but we're constantly told, do it this way, do it this way. You have to
mm.
have these numbers, you have to do this. And so, we have to learn how to recreate that in a framework that works for us.
Absolutely. I think that's so true, that women need to realize that they can live their life on their terms and
Mhm.
be financially stable and successful and fulfilled, and, play the role of mom or caretaker, whatever it is,
Yeah.
while living, on their own terms. There's so much opportunity and capability that we have within ourselves, that we can create these own opportunities for ourselves.
Yeah, and you just have to learn a couple of new skills and see things from a different area, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so I have 3 different programs, one for aspiring female entrepreneurs, startups, and side hustles. So, that's kind of how quickly can we get you to 6 figures.
Yeah.
And the second one is for women doing 6 figures. Usually they're solopreneurs. Maybe they have 1 or 2 employees, and we have a mastermind. And then I have a group for women doing 7 figures plus with a team, because these are all different situations, right? And
Absolutely.
different phases of business. So a lot of times you're starting out and you're listening to how, Steve Jobs, or let's think of a female, Sarah Blakely, that's the Spanx owner, right? Like how they do
Yeah.
business. It's like
Yeah.
when I was a financial advisor, it drove me crazy when people said, well, Warren Buffett said, and I was like, Warren has billions. You don't. Like, this is not the advice we want to listen to, right? So, so often we're listening to advice, but they're talking about a different stage of business than we're in. And so
Right.
I think it's so important to have that community. But what I do in all 3 levels is, first, we're going to go through the 5 pillars. The 5th one is your compelling vision that we're going to talk about today. And this is where we're
Yeah.
really getting you ready for the entrepreneurial journey, because you're the foundation as the female owner, just like you're the foundation of your home, your community, etc. So the more we get you prepared for the ride, the better it's going to be. And then we can scale, and then you have more joy and love in your life, and then you have more time for family, right?
Absolutely. So, do you want to jump into those 5 pillars and we can talk about that
Yeah.
compelling vision?
Sure. So, number 1 is time, energy, and confidence management. Strategically first, because what do we hear? I don't have time. I don't have time
Yep.
to do this, right? And there's some simple hacks where you can get like 10 hours a month back. That's a full work day, right? Like, this isn't
Yes.
rocket science. We just have to do it. And often when it comes to that, we can't see the forest for the trees because we're in
Absolutely.
overwhelm. And so that's why we need someone to help us. And then the second one is actually naming, owning, and defining your personal core values. Because
Oh, I love
again,
it.
I work with a lot of Gen X females, and we kind of lose ourselves in serving everyone else, but we're a human being here on earth for a purpose. So we
Yeah.
have to understand, I like to say your core values, and I like you to limit it to 3, and I'll share why. But this is what fills your cup up, right? So mine are alignment, affection, and adventure. And so if you have 3, you can do a quick check-in, like, oh, I'm a little off this week. What am I missing? So for example, during COVID, there was 0 adventure, right? So I had to get
Right.
super creative with entertaining myself, or I would have lost my mind. And, so you can do a quick check in, or when you make a major decision, it's pretty easy to check 3 things. Do you know what I mean? If you have 10 core
Absolutely.
values, it's not really a life hack. The third one is owning your worth. So, a
Mm,
lot of, as I share with you, I'm very spiritual as well. And a huge spiritual concept is that women should stand in their dignity. And
mm,
often in today's world, we are not good at standing in our dignity, right? We let people run over our boundaries. We're not good at saying no. And then in business, sometimes we have, maybe it's an inferiority complex or the scarcity, where we're not really like owning our worth. So, pillar 3
mm.
is all about money mindset, knowing what you're worth, what you should charge, and how to make decisions based on that, right? And then pillar number 4 is setting graceful boundaries and enhancing your self love. Because again, it all begins with you.
Yeah.
And so, pillar number 5, once we get all that done, is creating your compelling vision of the future, which is where we actually get into business planning. So, we
Love it.
finally get there at pillar 5.
Well, I mean, leading up to that pillar, like you said, is so important to focus on you as the business owner, because if you don't
Yeah.
have a solid foundation, then you're not going to be able to build that company or build that house, whatever that
Yeah.
is. It's just like when you think of it, as a foundation of building a house and that sort of thing. When the foundation cracks, the house is going to fall
Yes.
down. So if you
Totally.
don't do the inner work and you don't understand your core values and your value and your purpose, then the business growth is only going to get so far and you're going to hit a wall. So I love that you build that foundation up to that, business planning part.
Yeah, and it might not even hit a wall, but you might create a monster. Like, I know when I first started my financial planning business, I wasn't zeroed in on who my target audience was, right? And
Yeah.
then as we developed it, the people that fell outside of the target audience were the ones who called you all the time. They're the ones who needed everything. I mean, I literally had a client service nightmare that we had to hire people to fix because
Ugh.
I was not zoned in at the beginning. I'm coming off a
Yeah.
divorce. I want to help everyone and I'm
Yeah.
trying to serve everyone. And, one, you're not serving everyone because you
Mm,
can't be everything to all people. So I
right.
found that the more I niched and the more I specialized, the better my business grew. So,
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of ways you can hit that proverbial wall, which may be waking up one day and saying, I don't really like my business. And we don't want that either, right?
Oh my gosh, I know. And I think that's something that a lot of new entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs just starting a business is one of the biggest mistakes that they make is they try to
Yeah.
be all things to all people. And I've done it myself. When I started my business,
Mhm.
I had like a plethora of skill sets and I thought, well,
Yeah.
I could do all of it, right?
Right.
Instead of getting to, a core, set of services or skills and really honing that in to that niche and then targeting niche specific people and groups and audiences, it was just like, oh yay, like the spray
I
and
know.
pray approach. But it's
I
like
know.
you have to kind of learn. And I think a lot of entrepreneurship is trial and error, right? It's
Yeah.
learning through your experiences. And so it's like sometimes you have to go through that challenge and to really
Yes.
understand why you need to niche down and focus on core pieces to be
Yeah.
successful in the long run.
Well, and I agree, and that's why we divided our programs up. I started only with the middle program because I've learned this lesson of, okay, who do I serve? But I kept having people come to me on either
Yeah.
end, and I kind of hated saying, hey, that's not what I do. And
Right.
so I'm a certified high performance coach from the High Performance Institute. I'm like, okay, let's just do this for like aspiring and startup entrepreneurs because this is what
Yeah.
they need, right? They need to learn how to manage things and how to perform. And then, we created a program for above that's a little bit limited so that we make sure we can deliver. But that was like an easy extension of my core, right? But
Mm.
if suddenly I was like, oh, sure, if you're a male entrepreneur, we'll help you, or, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. It's okay. We'll have leaders in. And what I noticed, I did a couple of tests, is it dilutes the conversation. So,
Mhm.
I'm serving women who already don't have enough time. We're trying to get their time. So I want to make sure we're always giving them value, like to the
Yeah.
ultimate. So we want to make sure we can serve. But look, when I first started my financial planning business, none of this was a thought in my head because I'd never had that experience. So you're, like you said, you're probably not going to think about these things at the beginning, but the compelling vision helps you with that because the first step is, what is your purpose? Like, why does your company exist? Right. And for me, it was that vision of Madison Square Garden. And look, it's not a vision of me up on stage. It's the view from the stage of Madison Square Garden filled with women. And it's like a badass love fest. And like, I just like, yes, let's create this
Love
because,
it.
there's 22,000 plus that fit into a little over Madison Square Garden. So think about it. If we had 22,000 female entrepreneurs, we're talking about teaching and supporting each other to scale our businesses, but have more joy, peace, and love in our lives. And then they go
Mm.
out glowing. How many people do they impact? Right. And this is how we
Right.
start impacting the world. So, like, that's the actual overarching vision of our company. And then, of course, we have the niche, like what do we do best in the world and who do we serve? And then we have core values, which is really, most people misunderstand core values, I think. Usually, core values is for your internal climate and your internal culture, right? Like, who do we want
Yeah.
on the team and how do we operate? And if it's just you, it's still important because it helps you make decisions about who to
Absolutely.
partner with, what to say yes to. And you can use them in marketing, because it could be that you're attracting people that appreciate that this is what you focus on. And then, so again, I said the vision, but that's actually not, I got it wrong. Our purpose is actually to impact consciousness on earth by giving women permission to live life fully. Like, that's our purpose through what we do. Our BHAG, or our big, hairy, audacious goal, is this love fest in Madison Square Garden, right? Which we have slated for 2030. That's our goal. But, I have one client who's a photographer, and she does branding photography, and she wants to have an image in Vogue. That's her
Oh,
BHAG.
wow.
And so you see how this is kind of like the vision boarding, or the fun feminine part of business planning, because, Tori, as women, we're worried about who we're serving and what purpose we're serving, right? And
Mhm.
I think when you have that locked and loaded, it becomes your North Star. So on those days when you're like, really, do I have to call these people back? Like, you should pull up this, vision or purpose. And then you're like, oh yeah, that's why I have to make these calls. Okay, cool. No big deal.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love, because you keep referencing spirituality. So I'd love for
Yeah.
you to touch a little bit on how spirituality shapes your approach with your
Mhm.
business and helping other women with their business.
So spirituality shapes everything I do at this point in my life, which is one reason why I did make the career shift. I mean, I had a thriving financial business. We actually doubled in 2020. I did not
Wow.
have a business that was hurt by 2020. I just got called that I was supposed to be impacting people in a different way. And this is what came out. But I mean, I started infusing my spirituality into my financial practice, because I did a monthly webinar only for clients and their friends. And it was April 2020 we started. There were 250 households live on that call. And when I did my last one, December 2023, we still had 150 households, even when they had all these things to do on a Saturday morning. I would
Yeah.
only do it live because I wanted to talk about what I wanted to talk about. And a lot of times spirituality came into it, right? But, taking care of your finances. But for me, it impacts everything I do. I mean, I really think spirituality is your direct, people get confused. They're like, religion, blah, blah, blah. I heard a great definition where, like, religion is the dogma and set of rules you're often born into, and you decide if you want to stay in that set or move to another. Spirituality is your direct connection. I mean, I say
Mm.
God, you may say the universe, the quantum field, whatever it is, but that's your direct relationship, right? And
Yeah.
um my strongest held belief is we are made exactly like we are for a reason, to accomplish something on earth. And so, if that is not coming through in your business, what is the purpose? I mean,
Mm.
the cool thing is when it comes through and you make a lot of money, that's like a really great place to be, right?
They're fully aligned, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Oh,
so it's interesting you ask that, because you do marketing. It's very hard to market our programs, because that's the feedback we get on all our testimonials, like, "Oh my gosh, this was amazing. I didn't understand how holistic it would be," or like, "You actually helped me deconstruct myself to reconstruct." And the person who said
right.
that doubled their business in 12 weeks in the program, right? So, yeah, so maybe we can talk offline. You can help me with that, because, as you
Yeah.
know, that's a hard message to deliver. Um, but it's also giving, at the heart of my spirituality is unconditional love and compassion. And I just think the world needs more of both. And so, because of that, anyone in our programs or who works with us, they start to feel comfortable showing up exactly how they are, and not apologizing for things, and not beating themselves up. And, forgiveness is an important part of self-love. You have to forgive yourself every single day and forgive everyone else. And
Yeah.
when you start living that way, things just change. Business becomes
Mhm.
easier, life becomes easier, relationships. So I don't know. Sorry, that's a long answer. You asked me about my
No.
passion, but I think it's all connected.
Yeah, and when you live in that passion and you fully understand who you are and how it impacts you and what
Yeah.
you want to give to people, you attract those type of people, right? And that's the
Yes.
most important piece, is that when you live in your true self, you're attracting people to you who have similar core values and benefits and business aspirations, whatever it
Yeah.
is. And you become aligned with those people to help them even more. So I love that you don't shy away from that, and that you live in that true self. So I appreciate you
Yeah.
doing that.
And 2020 is part of it, but right now the world is inviting this. It's inviting us to step into like who we really are and speak our truth. I used to joke like in 2020, 2021, I was like, the world needs a good throat chakra clearing because I mean, how much were we like constrained what we thought we could say, what we couldn't say, right? Like I don't know, like self-expression just, really suffered in the last few years. And so it's
Yeah.
so important that we focus on this and that we hold space for others to be able to do the same.
Mhm. I love it. Well, April, I feel like we could talk for hours, and we probably will.
Sounds good.
But I just wanted to thank you so much for being a guest on the show. And are there any like pieces of advice that you can leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I think if you haven't really done business planning and you're new, if nothing else, get that big, compelling vision. Because, like I said, on the days when you're like, I don't want to make more calls or I don't want to work these hours, you really want that North Star. Because as women, we're driven by that. And in the past, we weren't allowed to operate in our feminine energy very much. And that's inviting us into our feminine energy, right? And it just, I don't know, it makes life easier and better. Like everything becomes really beautiful. So, really give yourself permission to be who you are and own it.
I love it. Well, thank you again for being a guest. How can people get a hold of you and get in touch if they want to learn more about what you do at Vixen Gathering?
Thanks, Tori. So it's vixengathering.com, Vixen. And on social, we're at Vixen Gathering. And I too have a podcast, The Vixen Voice. You can find us on all the podcast outlets. So thanks for asking that, Tori.